Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another Cambridge podcast. It's summertime in South Florida, so it's very warm, it's very hot, it's muggy. We do get quite a bit of afternoon showers coming in, but the beaches are awesome. They're incredible. The water is really, really nice. I went diving last weekend in the Florida Keys, and we had a really good time. And we just had a very short lobster season for 2 days, so it was really nice as well. Now, today I want to take a little bit of time and talk to all of you about a topic that is very dear to me because many of my clients are having challenges, issues, and concerns in understanding money. Now, they do have the ability to make money, but understanding money and what money does is a totally different issue altogether. So today I want to talk to all of you, and I want to share some ideas regarding understanding your personal economy when it comes to money. Will Rogers was a very famous actor, and he was a self-made millionaire. I think he did die in 1930, but he was always very eloquent, and he always made statements that were funny at times, but they did bring value, and they did bring information to most Americans at that time that were just dealing with the beginning of the Great Depression in the late 1920s. And Will Rogers once said that the problem in America isn't so much what people don't know. The problem is what people think they know that just ain't so. And that's a very profound statement because there's a tremendous amount of information in the marketplace. And one of the sayings that I give to my clients every time we have a discussion is that, although there's more information in the marketplace than ever before, Americans are worse off than they've ever been. And the reason for that is that information without education always leads to failure. So what I'd like to do today is kind of share some ideas and getting people to start thinking, outside of the box, because unless you have the ability to think outside of the box, your finances may never change in the future. Now, in discussing money with clients and friends and giving speeches and webinars and podcasts, as I do on a regular basis, there are four what I consider to be realms of knowledge when it comes to understanding issues and concerns from an educational standpoint. And the four realms of knowledge are as follows. Number one, there are things that we know. And all of us know that. You know what you know because of your educational background or personal experiences or whatever that may be. Number two is things that we don't know that we know. Now, there are some things in your personal life that you really didn't think that you knew, but they were deep in your subconscious, so you did have an understanding of it, and at some point in time in your life, it kind of surfaces, and all of a sudden you say to yourself, wow, I didn't know that I knew something about that particular subject. The number three is, the things that we know that we don't know. Obviously, I am not a brain surgeon, so I know very little as to how the brain works. So there are things that I know that I don't know. By the way, one of the things that I've always said to many of my friends and my family is that the more I know, the more I realize how little I know. And that's something that, although it sounds kind of funny, it is very, very true. And then last but not least are the things that we don't know that we don't know. So usually when I deal with clients, especially clients that are attempting to, prepare for retirement and make money decisions, I try to work with them primarily in number 3 and number 4. The things that we know that we don't know, and the things we don't know that we don't know. Because if I'm able to get them to change the way that they see things, obviously their decisions are going to be much, much better for themselves and their families in the future. Now, every individual in America has a personal economy. And your economy applies not only to every individual, but it applies to the family unit as a whole, and also to business enterprises. So everyone has a personal economy. So whether it's mortgages, lines of credit, 401ks, IRAs, similar plans of investments, life insurance, health, disability, car, home, liability, and other types of insurance, car loans, credit card debt, other debt that you may have, and obviously savings and investments. All of those things form your personal economy. Now, some items in your personal economy earn interest. Some cost you interest. Some lose interest. Most are affected by taxes. So it's the combination of all these that determine the real bottom line when it comes to your personal economy. Now, there are only two main sources of income in the marketplace. You do have people at work, and then you have money at work. And the same thing happens when you have Americans shifting from being at work for 30, 40 years, and they start to shift it into a retirement life. See, the rules of engagement totally change, because not only do you go from people at work, but now you go to money at work. And not only do you go from worrying as you're putting away money for investments and retirement, worrying about the amount of money that you're making in contributions every year, and also the rate of return that you're trying to gauge as you move forward. But now everything is shifting to the distribution rate. And how do you protect that income and those assets in retirement so they can maximize your retirement income and that of your family for many years to come? Now, obviously, we all do this automatically, but few of us truly understand that, there are only four things that you can do with your money. You can spend it, you can save it, you can transfer it, and many times we do that without even knowing about it, or you can give it away. Now, when you transfer money, that means you transfer money to financial institutions or to economic driven attitudes in opposition to what you're trying to do, that will actually cost you money, and we'll talk about that in the next few minutes. Or you can just give your money away. You can give it away to individuals. You can give it away to charities of your choice. But there are only four things that you can do with your money. Now, whenever I engage clients in the retirement planning process, and they're either maybe at retirement age or they're 5 to 10 years away from retirement, that's the vast majority of the clients that I engage. One of the things that we try to look at is how can we make every single dollar that they have in their personal economy more efficient and more with a higher aptitude for growth. From a business perspective. Usually I use the airplane analogy, which I have used in other podcasts here with many of you. If you take off on an airplane and you have an airplane flying in mid-flight, you will find that compound interest creates a lift. It's a good thing for the airplane. The airplane can obviously fly higher, and it can also fly longer if you apply the airplane scenario to money. So compound interest is very good. Now, compound tax is not very good at all, but compound interest is. Now, if you have a tax favorite plan, just like in the airplane scenario, it gives thrust. anytime that you can avoid paying taxation to the U.S. government, you get to keep more of your money, and the more money that you keep, the better off you're going to be in your life. So tax-favored assets are going to give you thrust as you're moving through retirement. Now, taxes, inflation, financial fees, propensity to consume, and some of the other things that we're going to talk in the next few minutes, they create weight and they create drag. And whenever you have your money being dragged or with weight attached to it, your money's working at a much less efficient rate than if you had compound interest and you had that lift, or you had a tax-favored investment and you had that thrust. So those are things that are very, very critical to understand as each and every one of us are attempting or trying to make the right kinds of money decisions at the right times and for the right reasons. Now, one of the major areas that have a negative impact on your finances and that can actually create a drag on your finances is inflation. Now, the impact of inflation is pretty much known as a silent killer. And the reason why it is a silent killer is because it's all around us. Now, you have the national inflation rate in the United States, and then you may have your own personal inflation rate based on your knowledge and know-how and your propensity to consume and the type of items that you purchase for yourself and your family as you move through life. But I want to give you some ideas as to what the negative impact of inflation are when it comes to managing your assets in retirement. Number one, inflation is not tax deductible. So if inflation is 3% in the United States, you cannot deduct that 3% from your income taxes when you do file them every single year. So let me give you an example of $1,000 at a 3% inflation rate. Now, in only 5 years, that $1,000 at a 3% inflation rate can only purchase $859 worth of goods and services. So in just 5 years, you have lost purchasing power in your inflation. So if you have investments as you get older and you get into retirement, you don't want to take any risk. Well, if you don't get enough rate of return on your investments, then you're automatically assuming inflation risk. Now, in 10 years, that $1,000 can only purchase $737 worth of goods and services. So you have to be able to keep up with inflation as much as you possibly can without giving up guarantees, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you don't run out of money before you run out of life. In 20 years, the $1,000 of investment today can only purchase $544 worth of goods and services. So almost 50% of your purchasing power, or the purchasing power of those $1,000 are lost to inflation in just 20 years. So that's an enormous amount. And not only that, it's not only the impact that inflation has, whether you want to or not, but we haven't even factored taxes into the equation. So in 20 years from now, in order for your $1,000 investment in year one to keep up with inflation, or your $1,000 in savings in year one to keep up with inflation, you would have to have at the end of 20 years, $1,806 in your account in order to have kept up with inflation. So in every single customized tax-preferred retirement blueprint that we do for our clients, we take these issues into consideration. And as I've said many a times, there are four major risks that our clients are taking every single day, whether you are in pre-retirement or post-retirement, are the risks of dying too soon, living too long, living with a disability, and living with eroding factors. And the eroding factors are the ones that we're addressing right now. Taxes, inflation, interest rate volatility, and so forth. And we'll get a little bit deeper into that in the next few minutes. But it's very critical that all of us understand how money works and what we need to do in order to enhance the viability of those dollars in retirement. Now, your personal economy, our personal economy, is divided into three parts. You have lifestyle money, you have accumulated money, and then you have your wealth transfers. Now, lifestyle money is fairly simple. It's money we spend to maintain our standard of living every single day of our lives. And there, obviously, food, clothing, utilities, maintenance, entertainment, vacations, and so forth, that all forms part of your lifestyle money. Now, your accumulated money is money that we try to save and grow for the future. And those include savings, investments, stocks, real estate, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, deferred compensation programs, annuities, and 7702 plans. Now, wealth transfers are the ones that are true killers in many of the things that we try to do with our clients on a regular basis. And this is primarily wealth transfers, or money transfers are primarily money that we spend and give away, sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly, and oftentimes unnecessarily. And those go to taxes, debt, interest that we pay, fees, and then last but not least, opportunity costs. Now, the other big question that I address with my clients as we go through the process of creating a tax-preferred retirement blueprint is, who are the creators of wealth transfers? And they all seem to control everything that we do every single day of our lives. And those are primarily your banking institutions, the Federal Reserve, and the government. Now, banking institutions control everything you do by charging us fees and financial fees, for any type of contact that we have with them. Try depositing $100,000 into a banking institution today and try to find out what kind of rate of return you can get on a CD. Is barely going to be 2%. Yet, the $100,000 that you just deposited with your bank, now your banking institution has the ability to explode and to multiply it many a times over, and they can lend that money to others, and for that lending privilege, they're receiving many a times 10, 15, 20, 25, 30% rate of return. As a matter of fact, one of the things that many people don't understand is that, banking institutions have something called fractional reserves. That means that under normal circumstances, for every dollar that you deposit in a banking institution, there's a 10-to-1 ratio, which means that they can lend out that dollar in a multiple of 10 times. Now, during the depression that we went through in 2008, hundreds and thousands of banks went under in the United States, and that's why they have FDIC protection, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which means the vast majority of banking institutions are protected by insurance companies. But one of the main reasons is that they were leveraged so high during those years that the fractional reserves ratios were no longer a 10-to-1. There were 15, 20, 25, many times 30 or 35 to 1, which was very critical from that perspective. So obviously banks get to quadruple the investments based on the money that we give them, and then in return they give us just a little bit of interest in order for us to feel good about lending the money or depositing the money with them. Now, the Federal Reserve is an interesting creature. There's a great book that was written many years ago. It's called The Creatures from Jekyll Island. And Jekyll Island was the place where in the late 1800s to early 1900s, the people that controlled America got together and they created the IRS and the IRS code. As a matter of fact, the IRS came to being in 1913. And it's gone downhill ever since. But interesting to note about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve Bank is not federal. It has no reserves and is not a bank. Now, how do you figure that when it comes to a podcast or a governmental quasi entity, as people think it is, but they're not? And then obviously the government are always confiscating the assets that we have through taxes and legislation, and obviously things that they do in order to prevent Americans from growing their assets in the way that they should. Now, there are 10 major wealth eroding factors to your money and to your personal economy, and we've already talked about some of them. I'm just going to mention all 10 of them. You have taxes, you have loans and interest charges that you got to pay to financial institutions. You have financial expenses that you pay to, insurance companies or investment companies or your 401k provider and so forth. Lost opportunity cost, what you could have done with your money had you made a different decision altogether. That all compounds the potential drag on your money. Inflation, we just talked about inflation. Stock market volatility. So therefore, stock market declines, stock market interest rate declines as well. Technological changes, we're a spending society, so every time there's a new and better gadget coming into the marketplace, we find a way to try to grab it, and by doing so, we're giving our money away many a times without having a need to do so. Obviously, I drive a BMW, but, I don't need to drive a BMW. I could drive a Chevrolet and pay a lot less money in that process. So you have to be keen about those decisions, especially as you're approaching retirement. Planned obsolescence, nothing is built forever, especially in a country like ours, which is a consumer-based type country, so things go back. You own a home, the roof may have to be replaced. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that you have inside your home, your furniture, refrigerator, microwaves, things, driveways that you need to repair, those things are wealth eroding factors that you need to factor, especially as you get into retirement. Now, one of the first principles that we all must understand is that, we finance everything you buy. We either pay interest to someone else when we borrow money, or we give up interest on our capital when we pay cash. So, I have this conversation with clients, and sometimes it's a little bit challenging for them to understand, but many of my clients feel that, if they pay cash, they're not financing. They'll say, Bert, I don't finance anything. I pay cash for everything. Well, that's also a form of finance. So remember, everything in America is financed. Everything that you acquired in the United States is financed. Either you pay interest to someone else when you borrow money, or you fail to receive interest on your money by paying cash. And when you pay cash for an item, that item not only costs you the dollars that you paid for, but also the interest that those dollars could have earned had you made a different decision altogether, and had you left those monies in the account and not use it for that purpose. Now, obviously, we all need to buy automobiles, but do we need to buy a $60,000 automobile? Now, if you pay cash for that, then you're going to be paying, obviously, the $60,000 cost on a depreciating asset, but also you're no longer earning interest on that, on those $60,000. Well, why not buy a $30,000 car or a $35,000 car? And then the rest of the money can continue to earn, so at least you're alleviating the opportunity cost on those investments. Now, debt is the silent killer, just like inflation is, of your future hopes and dreams. And I get this all the time. So you have a husband and wife earning $100,000 a year. They're paying about 34.5 cents or 34.5%. They're making interest payments to financial institutions. But they do have a $150,000 retirement account. And in 1 year, they got a 10% return on that retirement account. So the $150,000 now became $165,000 because they earned $15,000 for that year. And they're all very happy. But what they don't realize, and the reason for that, is they look at their finances through a microscope. But when you look at your finances, or at least at the finances of this couple that I'm just mentioning right now, through a telescope, what do you realize? Well, you realize that they made 10% on their savings, so their savings went up by $15,000, but they lost 34.5% to interest payment to financial institutions. So they lost $34,500. So they gained $15,000 on one side of the ledger, and they lost $34,500 on the other side. So the net loss for that year was $19,500. So out of the $100,000 of income, they lost 19.5% to interest payments to financial institutions, and they don't even know that they had lost that money. So just learning how to control this can have a significant impact on your savings and investments in the future. Now, it is interesting to note, and it's good for all of us to know on this podcast, that the average consumer pays over 34.5% of their after-tax dollars to interest over their lifetimes. And that's obviously all kinds of interest payments that you're making. When you purchase a home, you're making interest payments. When you purchase automobiles, you're making interest payments. Most families cannot be just with one car in the family, so they have multiple cars. So those things, if you buy some real estate property, you're also paying interest out of that. So any debt that you have, credit cards is a major one. That's a great way for you to start maybe recovering some of that debt, is to reduce your credit card debt. So the average American family spends 34.5 cents out of every after-tax dollar in meeting and satisfying debt payments. Now, many a times in discussing taxes with my clients, they'll say, well, Bert, I'm in the 20% tax bracket, I'm in the 25% tax bracket. And I argue that there's a big difference between the tax bracket that they allude to and the actual taxes that they pay. And the reason for that is whenever we have a discussion about taxes, my clients are only thinking about the federal income taxes that they pay every year. But they fail to realize all the other taxes that are associated with what they're doing in their personal economy that is creating drag and weight onto their personal economic dollars. And what are those taxes? I'm not going to name them all because we would be here for another 30 minutes just covering those. But federal income taxes, Social Security taxes, state income taxes if you live in a state that pays income taxes, city tax, county tax, property tax, that's a big one. Everyone pays property taxes. Personal property taxes, sales taxes, school tax and long-term care capital gains, short-term capital gains, gasoline tax, that's a major one, water tax, sewer tax, taxes on energy, gas, electricity, heating oil, etc. So when you really start thinking about the amount of taxes that you pay out of every dollar that you earn, the numbers are closer to 40 to 50% than what most people may think, that is only 20 to 25%. So again, I thought that today would be a good idea to have a discussion as to your personal economy and how money works. Think of it this way. If you have a bucket that is full of holes, it doesn't matter how much water you put into that bucket, those holes are going to continue to leak out. And the best thing that you can do with a bucket of water full of holes, and before you put any water into them, it is a good idea to plug the holes and make sure that the holes are dry before you start putting money into that financial bucket. So again, always remember that our number one goal here at Cambridge, and my number one goal for all of you, is to kind of help you change in the way that you see things, because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of your time today, and we'll talk again next week. Take care. Bye.